Hi, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner with the Robust Opposition. I'm here at my house, and we're doing a meet and greet for Gayle McLaughlin, who is the corporate-free candidate for lieutenant governor here in California.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you who I know share my values, and to be able to share with you some of the successes we've had in Richmond and talk a little bit about this campaign I'm running for lieutenant governor. So let me start out by reintroducing myself. I'm Gayle McLaughlin, and I was the first corporate-free council member and the first corporate-free mayor in Richmond, California. And thank you. And I wasn't the last. I'll share with you how many we have in a second. But I also am a co-founder of the Richmond Progressive Alliance, and that's the RPA. The RPA is really the organization that builds this local political power and runs corporate-free candidates for local office. And today, in Richmond, we have, as of November 2016, we have won 5 corporate-free council seats out of 7. So that's a super majority. So we're very proud. It took us, several years to get to this point. I was often a minority. Even when I was mayor, I was a minority of RPA council members, or members of the council, rather. But I had the bully pulpit, so a lot of good could be done by spreading the progressive message. And so because of the RPA, and the RPA, to give you a little description of it, is an inclusive, diverse, independent, corporate-free, year-round organization. We came together based on our progressive values, regardless of party affiliation. There were Green Party members, people registered Democrat who were obviously progressive Democrats, Peace and Freedom members, people who had no party affiliation. We came together because we had had enough in our city. We had been protesting. We saw the problems. Richmond is a working class community, a community with poverty, with a high crime before the RPA, and a city that has a major oil refinery in our city, the Chevron oil refinery. And before the RPA came about, the city was spiraling downward, and it had been for decades. The whole city council, first of all, was in the hands of Chevron. Either they were financed by Chevron, and that meant they were purchased by Chevron because they did whatever Chevron wanted, or they were intimidated by the oil giant. So the whole city government was totally in domination by this multi-billionaire, corporation, multinational corporation. And to give you a sense of how bad it was, a Chevron representative had a desk outside the city manager's office. And Chevron representatives actually gave workshops to city officials on how to run City Hall. So now, if that isn't, really a tie-in between corporations and government, I don't know what is. So we were clear that we weren't getting things done. We were protesting police brutality. We were, standing up for the rights of the homeless. We were protesting Chevron. We were protesting all the negative issues that were going on in the city. The crime was not getting better. We were known as a very high violence city. And so, we figured the only way we're going to really get anything done is to become the leaders we're waiting for. And so we decided to run candidates without any corporate money for city council, because we needed people behind the dais as well as people coming up to the public podium. But we needed people to cast those votes on behalf of the community. So we needed, when somebody asked me to run for city council, they said, "Go ahead, Gayle, all you need to do is press that button, And I said, I can do that, I knew how to stand for the people, but of course it always turns out to be much more than just pressing the button. But certainly, being a candidate means more than anything someone who is collaborative with the community, someone who has integrity, and someone who has those progressive values that they're willing to speak through the megaphone, through the bully pulpit of the position. And so, after I was elected as a council member, I ran for mayor and, was reelected, and all the time, it was with opposition from this big oil company who tried to defeat me and other progressives in every election, spending, millions and millions of dollars. Chevron spent $3.5 million in 2014 to try and defeat the progressives, and myself and 2 other RPA progressives beat Chevron and all their candidates. All the progressives won, and all the Chevron candidates lost. So it clearly can be done. It can be done if you have an organization built that is truly there to stand separate from corporations. And, sometimes people say, well, I've heard other elected officials say, well, you need the money to run, but or, hey, the money is not going to affect me. I'm still going to vote, the way, that my conscience tells me. But that's never the case. And I think a perfect example is Speaker Rendon, who just recently, who voted or who shelved single payer, and he took hundreds of thousands from the insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. So we were clear in Richmond that corporate free was the way to go. And because of our of the elected officials that we had in office and we have in office and the community movement building organization, we were able to really accomplish some major things. We have a minimum wage increase up to $15 an hour. We have $114 million in additional taxes from Chevron. And that all came from pushing, and educating the people that you have to get fair taxation, and you can't just say, oh, we don't want to make waves with this big corporation. Maybe they'll leave Richmond, and we say, well, maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, Especially they don't even hire our residents. They only hire about 5% of their employee force comes from Richmond. So they pollute us on a daily basis. Their refinery blows up periodically and sends people to the hospital. Lots of problems, and and our community finally had enough. And so our education campaign, getting our elected officials in office, made all the difference in the world. In addition, we did things like we joined a community choice aggregation, which is allows our residents and businesses to get their electricity from cleaner, greener, and cheaper sources of energy. So we're proud of that. And one of the things that we're especially proud of is that we got our crime down. But because before the Richmond Progressive Alliance came about, crime was really high in Richmond. We were known as, the murder capital of the U.S. by some. And we got our homicide rate down 75% over the 8 years I was mayor. So we did it by addressing the roots of our violence. We did it by putting into place a community-involved police chief who shifted the culture of the police department to a significant extent, not completely, but and we did it by putting into effect an Office of Neighborhood Safety, which had outreach teams into the neighborhoods, which these outreach teams were made up of formerly incarcerated individuals who had turned their lives around, and they reached out to the young people who were involved in street factions and shared with them, you don't want to end up in San Quentin, you don't want to end up in prison, so, here's some ways that you can get your life on the right track. And we reduced this homicide rate. Still, we went from 47 homicides in 2007 to 11 in 2014. Still 11 too many, so the work has to continue, and it will continue because we have some great council members on the council right now. We also stopped an urban casino. We also, yes, we also, gave our school district $3 million because we wanted to stop them from closing our neighborhood schools. We opposed local jails and instead put into effect reentry services. We have a reentry solutions group so that we can really help people when they get out of prison. So all this addressing the root causes of violence, addressing the root of all our problems, is the way we were able to make change. One innovative program we put into effect is called, or we tried to put into effect, I should say, is the eminent domain program. Some of you may have heard of it. It's a foreclosure prevention program, and what we did is push back on Wall Street, who was foreclosing homes all over our city, and 50% of our homes were, of our mortgages in Richmond were underwater. So we were telling the banks, listen, you got to reduce the principals in line with the home's value, and this way people will stay in their homes. You'll still get their mortgage payments, an affordable mortgage payment for the family, and our neighborhoods will stay, intact. And if you're not going to do that, we're going to take these junk mortgages at this point because they were so out of line with the home's value at that point, and we, the city, will take these mortgages by eminent domain, and we will reduce the principals for the families and keep them in their homes and keep our neighborhoods intact. So it was really an innovative program. A professor at Cornell University came up with it. I championed it as mayor, and we really pushed hard and made some pressure on the big banks, and they did modify on their own, some more mortgages, and we're glad it had that effect. Before we were able to use eminent domain, Congress, because Wall Street got to them, the corporate lobbyists lobbied them so strongly, Congress put into effect a bill that said any entity, any government entity that acquires a mortgage by eminent domain cannot get government insurance for the mortgages. So, we needed to insure the mortgages for the homeowner, so that effectively killed it, at least for now. We know the housing situation is still a problem, and, we suspect in the future it'll continue to be, and it may be able to be resurrected. ACE was a great community organization that worked with us on that program. So the RPA model is a model that works with community groups, the elected officials that are elected by the RPA's endorsement and through this corporate-free model of government. Work side by side with the community. It's really a reciprocity relationship that we have had, and it's made all the difference in the world. And so, there's so many other accomplishments that I could tell. There's some that I can share if you go to my website, galeforcalifornia.org. But because, I'm sorry, I want to mention the rent control law. We passed the first new rent control law in California in 30 years. So some of these accomplishments were so groundbreaking, that communities everywhere started to ask us to come and speak to them, just like I'm speaking to all of you here today, as to how did you do it in Richmond? How did you get a supermajority on the city council? How did you get rent control, minimum wage increase? How did you get all that money from Chevron? And, so we have been going around, myself and a few other people from RPA, and sharing our model, knowing that, we think it's replicable in other cities, even if they're bigger cities, if you have enough people playing leadership roles in the community. But also, even if it isn't 100% replicable, it's important to have people know what we did and how we did it so that they can take what they want. I know every community has their own level, most anyway, of organizing already going. So take what you want from our model has been our motto, and leave the rest, And we since we've been doing this outreach, there have been new progressive alliances coming up all over. There is a San Diego Progressive Alliance. After I spoke with them back in February, they formed. There's a South Bay Progressive Alliance in San Jose area. There's around Richmond, El Cerrito Progressive Alliance. There's, Oakland is forming something, San Francisco. Everywhere people are recognizing that you can build from the bottom up local political power. So that's the message that my campaign is all about. My campaign for lieutenant governor is all about letting people know that local political power is what's needed. And it became clear to me that I have an opportunity, if I run for this statewide race, to use this larger stage, this broader, this louder megaphone to really share the message to more people. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm running. Another reason is because it's clear that as much as we need that local political power, we understand that you can't advance totally from a local level on all the issues. Thank you. So you have to, some issues cannot be advanced from a local level. And in that, for that reason, these statewide issues that I'm going to talk about need to be addressed, and a campaign for a higher office allows that to happen. So I'm running on things like single-payer health care for all, free college California, and oil severance tax. California is, the only major oil-producing state that does not have a tax on oil extraction. And, Texans and Alaskans get that money. Californians should too, so. A millionaire's tax is important. A real millionaire's tax, so that each $1 million that comes in to someone's taxable income that they take in has a higher percentage going upward, to $12 million, 12% increase in their taxation. So Prop 13 needs to be reformed. We need to, close that corporate loophole. Our schools used to be number one. Now they're at the bottom. If we get that money from closing the corporate loophole in Prop 13, we can rise again in terms of our education. We need to stop the privatization of our public school system. And stop that expansion of charter schools, which is, siphoning those needed resources away from the public school system at large that should be guaranteeing every student a quality education. We need to stop building prisons, and we need to stop privatizing prisons, I mean, the whole idea of privatization is to make a profit. And if you privatize prisons, that would mean the goal would be to get more people in prison so they can make more of a profit. When in reality, the idea, the true thing we should be supporting is to get less people in prison, and those that are in prison given that rehabilitation and that release those who are nonviolent offenders from prison. So. These are some of the many things that we need to change in California. Of course, I would like to see California become a sanctuary state. Richmond is a sanctuary city, and we're suing Trump, by the way, because of his his policies against sanctuary cities. And so, some of the stuff we've done in Richmond can be replicated on a larger stage. In California, other things are unique to statewide issues. So my purpose here in running is to, raise these issues, encourage local political power building, and to keep an eye on Sacramento for that corporate interference that is truly making our state democracy, we're losing our state democracy because of it. So I will definitely be a watchdog on Sacramento. And so as I do this campaign, and I'm, visiting cities all over California, I'm running to win and running to build a movement, not unlike Bernie did. Of course, on a statewide level, Bernie did an incredible thing for us all by running for president. And yes, I believe he moved our movement forward 30 years. You know, I mean, we would be 30 years behind if it where we are right now. We have this energy because of him, so I'm very grateful. He came to Richmond in 2014 and endorsed me and my two colleagues running for council. So I feel very comfortable that I'm in good company with Bernie supporters and with progressives who understand that corporate interference has to go. And with that, I'm going to give the microphone back to Lauren.
Isn't she fantastic, folks? All right. The first thing that I want to ask you is why no party preference and not running in the Democratic Party like Bernie did?
I actually used to be a Green Party member. I switched to NPP, no party preference, as of earlier in 2016 to vote for Bernie Sanders, knowing his, what he was doing was so phenomenal. I decided to stay no party preference because I think it allows me to get closer to people of various party affiliations and people of no party affiliations. There are 4 million people in the state of California who are registered NPP. So first of all, California elections, statewide elections, are, as we all know, the top 2 vote getters, regardless of party. So, in many ways, you could say it is a nonpartisan race. Democrats and Republicans have their title be after their names, as a Green Party would have Green Party after their names. I'll have NPP after my name, but the purpose is to get in the top 2, and the top 2 can be, regardless of party or no party affiliation. So for me, that's not the biggest thing. For me, the biggest thing is to build a movement. And then when I'm elected, and I believe I will, because I'm reaching out to so many wonderful forces of people. I'm reaching out to every Our Revolution group in the state of California, and they're just so receptive to the work and the ideas and the values that I'm putting forward, and they understand. I think we all understand the power of people when we unite. So I believe that going to all these groups will, and having these groups spread out and spread the message of my campaign and the issues of California will allow me to win. And then when I win, I'll keep the organizing going. I'll keep building the movement. I'll keep showing that we have a force in this state that can change the whole nature of our democracy so that we are free of corporations controlling things. Why not Democrat? Well, to me, I have this opportunity to, I actually was never, I think I was a Democrat once when I was 21. I voted for McGovern. And that's not to say that I don't work closely with progressive Democrats, because I do. We share the same values. All the other RPA office holders that were elected in Richmond are progressive Democrats. And I think the fight that the Democratic Party Bernie-crats are fighting is a good fight, and the fight that Bernie's fighting that when he was a Democrat, I think he went back to being an independent now, is a good fight, and I support that. And I also support just movement building from a position of an independent. So that's where I'm standing.
What kinds of other things can we do on the state level that would be like that would build a green infrastructure and also create jobs like we're doing here, because we got 3 of the biggest electric bus manufacturers right here in the county, but things that would build an economy where we are not forced to give those creeps our money?
Off the top of my head, some things that come to mind are building electric charging stations all over the state so that, people can not only, and making perhaps some incentives for reducing the cost of electric cars, but also allowing people to go longer distances on electric cars and having those electric charge stations available. I know that was a goal in the Bay Area to have, I forget, there was a huge goal of having so many electric cars on the road by a certain time, which hasn't exactly moved in that direction. But I think we can make such goals and put pressure on the legislature and make it happen. So that's one idea that comes off the top of my head, but I know there's so many more, and I would love to work with you on it.
As you may know, that Gavin Newsom, our current Lieutenant Governor, has sort of made light of the position of Lieutenant Governor and saying that it's sort of like a figurehead position, et cetera. What can we do? What can you do? I'm sorry, Democratic Party, behind you 120%, to make Lieutenant Governor less of a figurehead position and to really use it as a bully pulpit for these issues that are so hugely important.
In Wikipedia, it says, the job of the lieutenant governor is to get up in the morning, read the newspaper, and find out if the governor is still living. And as long as he's still living, go back to bed, So, that's kind of how it's been seen. But I think it's what you make of the position, So you do sit on certain boards like the UC Board of Regents and the State Lands Commission. So how can we use some of those seats by, organizing the community, organizing students to come to, Board of Regents meetings and talk about free college California. And I would be at my seat at the microphone, talking the same talk as the community, and the other board members would hear that and they would feel the pressure. So I think the same way we did it in Richmond when we had a minority of council members and I was a minority as mayor, organize the community. As a mayor, I was also an organizer. As lieutenant governor, I will also be an organizer. And I will work with the community members who are also organizers, and we will put the pressure on those whose votes are needed to make the kind of policies that we need happening. So, and I'll use the press, and I'll use, like strategies. We'll have community leaders come. Thank you, Lord. Community leaders come together, who are experts on various issues: single payer, free college California. All the many issues that we know have some details to them that we need that expertise. And then we'll have a press conference and a rally, and we'll sit down in my office and we'll work out a whole timetable of what we're going to do to get this accomplished. So, that's how I feel that we could use this position to our collective benefit.
I wanted to mention something about the Regents, because I had an opportunity to watch Occupy the Regents back after, when the Occupy movement was in full swing. And one thing that they were trying to get the Regents to do was get out of those credit default swaps with Goldman Sachs and all those banks, because that was one of the financial instruments that they used to try to say, okay, we'll lock you into this low rate, so that way if rates rise, you won't have to pay more. And then, of course, interest rates did nothing but go down for 10 years, and all these governments and entities were stuck holding the bill. Now, I remember at the time that the city of Oakland was saying, if you don't renegotiate, we're going to default on those swaps. And the students at Berkeley and all the different UCs that were up north tried to occupy the meeting to say you should do the same thing. But guess what? So many of the board members on the Regents actually were directors of the very same banks that benefited from this. What do you think about that? Not only renegotiating the swaps, I don't know if they're still in play, but also divesting the money that they have in fossil fuel companies.
Divesting from these swaps and fossil fuel companies and other corporations, the big banks and such, is a great way to organize and to get it implemented. So yes, you're going to have members that are my colleagues, if you will, on the Board of Regents. But just like when I was mayor, I was sometimes one or two of a minority. And with the community there saying, hey, this has to be done, the others on the council who were Chevron dominated, just like the other board members on the Regents, who are dominated by, Goldman Sachs and others, are going to hear from me at my microphone and the community at the public forum microphone. And that pressure makes a difference. And with the press there, and with writing lots of letters and all the kind of organizing that's needed, with someone sitting on the board, making the message even more clear. So we utilize the community, and, I'm here to be used, if you will, by the community for the issues of the community. And you have my promise, and, that's what I know how to do. I know how to stand side by side with the community and work for the issues. And I'm a hard worker. I have a lot of endurance, I'll tell you that. I put up with Chevron's attacks for, 12 and a half years, and I'm still standing. So I can promise that my endurance will be there. I get good night's sleep. My husband and I take downtime and take a little camping trip once a year. And we are ready for this fight, and we will do it together. So with the community.
I'm very concerned about climate change, and I know you're working at the local level, so there's a lot of limitations about what you can do to fight Chevron in your city. But I'm concerned that by taxing Chevron, then the city becomes dependent on the funds from Chevron. For instance, you need to pay for education, you need to pay for healthcare, X, Y, and Z. Or even at the state level, if we're going to be taxing oil companies, we need to get off fossil fuels 100% right now, as soon as possible. So do you feel like there will be politicians who are pressured to stay with fossil fuels so they can get money to fund social services and more money in the coffers of the state? What are your thoughts on taxing these companies? Should we do it? Is it a bad idea? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to also push back on that, because Food and Water Watch is against an oil severance tax for that very reason, because these states become dependent on it for education and social services. So do you think you would listen as you're going around the state, and if people can convince you that that may not be the best position, would you be open to changing your mind?
Yeah, I certainly would be on the oil severance tax. I'd be open to hearing other perspectives. I mean, to me, it's always been a position of fair taxation, as long as these operations are in operation. Chevron had a tax perk going back to, I think it was the early 90s, in terms of their utility users tax. And we raised the issue that, hey, if every household should pay 10% of their utility bill in taxes, Chevron should pay 10% of its utility bill in taxes. So it was a fair taxation issue. Now, in terms of of some council members or elected officials becoming dependent on this money, I certainly don't think that one should consider this, any kind of fair taxation from a big corporation as the only source of income. In Richmond, we always talked about diversifying, and we've got a huge, number of green businesses that have come to Richmond and high-tech businesses. We need more, we don't want our tax base to be dominated by Chevron. So we pushed for this fair taxation because they have harmed our community so much, and we felt we needed it now, and they should be giving it. And the argument that many people said that were on Chevron's side is, don't make waves. They already give us so much taxes. They might go away, So the answer to that we gave was, God forbid they went away, we might be a whole lot better off. In fact, that's prime real estate right on the bay where Chevron exists, and, we could utilize that for in fact, first of all, we could utilize it with good jobs to clean it up. Chevron would have to pay for the cleanup of the refinery, and we would put our young people and people to work that are Richmond residents, versus right now Chevron not even hiring our residents to work in the refinery. So we don't sort of build that dependency by any means. It's clear that we need a diversified economy, and it's clear if they went away today, we'd make good use of that site. And it's also clear that we have to transition away from fossil fuels. I mean, that's 100% the way it is.
Yeah, for that, taking 100% of the revenue from the severance to specifically just for green jobs. So that way you build up an industry and then you get more taxes that way so that we can phase out the oil. Yeah, because if you go to education and stuff, then you have to find new revenue. But if this is just going to build our green economy, that could be a way to close the loop.
I live in a town which is dominated by the Chamber of Commerce. Real estate has gone up so that now there's no house under $1 million, really, even my little pokey house. And so, and there's a lot of business interests and old established business people with wealth who put a lot of pressure. And I would like to know that how have you withstood, if there are those pressures in Richmond, how have you withstood, because they can get very nasty?
I mean, I served on a city council where, I was the only one who was not your traditional Chamber of Commerce person and Chevron friendly, type person. So the Chamber of Commerce has never supported me. The Chevron, of course, has never. They can get pretty nasty. And Chevron has bought up every billboard in the city. When I was in 2014, after I termed out as mayor and was running for city council again, they tried to portray me as someone that was globe-trotting, going around the world, taking all these trips. When the community, by that time the community knew me for who I was. I mean, I had been in office 10 years by that time, and they just laughed at it because they knew I was in the community constantly. And it was clear that out of the 8 years I was mayor, I was out of the country 22 days. And the other council members took trip after trip after trip. So it was a complete lie. I went to, and all my trips, my 3 trips were all educational. One, I went to Ecuador to see the contamination by Chevron of the Ecuadorian rainforest. I was invited by the president of Ecuador. Not any city funds were used for that. Another trip was I went to Mondragon, Spain to learn about worker-owned cooperatives. Again, a nonprofit paid for my trip. And then we have a sister city in Cuba, Regla, Cuba, and that was a city-sponsored trip. I went as mayor. I led a delegation. But those were the 3 trips. So anyway, they attack you. They tell you that, they try and convince the community. And it's not only the corporations, the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, there's wealthy people in Richmond. We have a multi-income community. We're largely a working class, lower income, but there are some pockets in Richmond of more affluent people, and some of them are progressive, but others are, more, right wing, like you say, and you just have to be who you are. And if they want to side with the opposition and call you names or tell you, things that I was told, that I was a dreamer, I was idealistic, it had never happened, they did a horrible campaign on me in my reelection campaign for mayor, where they attacked my background and such, and it was really horrible, but it only made the community come closer to me. I had just to share with you, I had a little depression in my background, and who doesn't have, some depression, especially in these times, so they tried to paint me as unfit for office. So the community was like, wait a minute, those who aren't depressed in these times, are kind of, are right. So anyway, it was clear that Chevron's attacks, the Chamber's attacks, and those more right-wing individuals in the city fell on deaf ears with the majority of the people of Richmond.
My district actually went for Bernie. A year ago, we're so proud of that. The only one in LA that did, because we worked really, really, really hard. One of the issues, and it's nationwide, is gentrification. Its ugly head has been raised everywhere. I'm from Detroit originally. They're actually holding an event in September to bring back all the snowbirds that have left the state to invest in Michigan again, in Detroit again. How would you go about dealing with this issue? Because it's been painted as an us versus them, the invaders versus the folks that have been there, but it's really economics. So how would you address that?
So gentrification, of course, has hit the Bay Area big time. San Francisco is heavily gentrified. Oakland is, pretty heavily gentrified, and it was moving and is still moving toward Richmond. And so that was one of the reasons that we put forward the rent control ballot measure that passed with 2/3 vote. It doesn't stop it altogether, and of course you can only put rent control in effect for the older buildings because of Costa-Hawkins Act. And on a state level, we could repeal Costa-Hawkins and protect more renters. But rent control is only part of the solution. We need to have we need to protect those people who are living in our communities now. I mean, having coffee houses and other things and good businesses who are accountable to the people and pay their fair share of taxes and don't pollute and all that are fine. But we need to, at the same time, have truly affordable housing. Ideas that I have come up with are things like giving maybe some tax breaks to those nonprofit affordable housing developers and taxing higher amounts of taxes to luxury development builders, So, something we have to do to bring about the kind of real affordable housing, because right now the affordable housing that some developers, they'll say, 15% are affordable. And I ask, well, what do you consider affordable? And they say, well, somebody who makes $80,000 a year, and that's for a Richmond family just won't cut it. So, so we need to come up with incentives and tax those higher luxury units. Some other ideas that we've been involved with in Richmond, and I think could be statewide, are the building tiny homes. We have a pilot project going in Richmond right now. It's part, and it will be used specifically to house the homeless. But I think at some point it could be utilized for people who could pay us the low income amount for their use of these tiny homes. Also, another way to build affordable housing is to build land trusts, community land trusts. And that's the kind of model that you build houses, and it could on public land, and the homeowner that buys the homes will not pay for the land. They just pay for the house on the land. The city would keep ownership of the land, so the house would be more affordable, and then the house would have to sell in an affordable way as well. So, and we could have these houses built by Habitat for Humanity. So we want to utilize what's out there, good ideas, hold on to public land and utilize it for the good of our communities.
I have thought a lot about how to bridge the contentious debate between progressives inspired by Bernie who want to infiltrate and change the Democratic Party and the progressives who want to leave it and start something new. And with you specifically, and seeing whenever there's a viable path to victory completely independent from the Democratic Party, I am wholeheartedly behind it. And long term, though, what the conclusion I've come to is we need to definitely elevate the discussion of electoral reforms, mainly ranked choice voting, and so that we can really kind of transcend the dependency of the Democratic Party to be the voice of the left, the way that you were able to do with the Richmond Progressive Alliance and uniting progressive Democrats, partyless progressives, and third-party progressives. And so will you use the bully pulpit as Lieutenant Governor to educate, advocate for, and eventually get victory for ranked choice voting and other electoral reforms on a statewide level? And if you could speak to that.
Sure. Yes, I absolutely would. I'm a big supporter of ranked choice voting and proportional representation. I would love to see proportional representation happen on a statewide level. We could have proportional representation so if different parties are running, let's say the Green Party is running for a certain legislative seat, or would have to require some changing of our system here in California, or if it was nationwide. But certainly, speaking to California, it could be done, and it should be done. And this way, let's say Green Party won 10% of the vote, then they would get 10% of the seats on the legislature. It would give them more of a voice, right? And any third party would have that opportunity. So that's, ranked choice voting is you get to rank your first choice. So even if you want to vote for somebody as the first choice and you're thinking maybe they won't win, so I want to have my second choice be somebody else who I think could win, even though I like number one better, you just rank your choices. And if your first one isn't going to win, doesn't get enough votes, then your second vote is counted, and third, etc. So yeah, I definitely support those. And like I said before, I support the fight within the Democratic Party. I think it's a good fight. It needs to happen. And I also support the fight outside of the Democratic Party for, some people want to see a new party. Some people are working with the Green Party, with the Peace and Freedom Party. I think we all have to keep these good fights going and build a movement. So that's my main focus, movement building.
Okay, so my question also concerns housing, which a couple of people already touched on. A group of people in Glendale have started a Glendale Tenants Union, precisely because we're keeping stories about people whose landlords are raising their rents by 50%, like overnight. And the laws as currently written definitely favor the landlords over the tenants. And I would very much like to hear more about how you passed your rent control measure, because a group of us are working toward getting that done in Glendale.
Yeah, so rents are skyrocketing, and in Richmond the same thing was happening, still is happening in some of the units that we can't rent control, going up 50%, 70%, sometimes 100%. So it's really outrageous. It's obscene, the way this whole rent increase situation has hit the Bay Area and all of California. What we did actually, when the RPA started, actually back in 2003, we were for rent control. We were working with a group that was working for rent control and just cause for eviction, and we didn't have the votes, and we didn't have enough pressure to make it happen when the RPA first started. By the time in 2015 came along, we had tried various times within that span as well. But in 2015, we had the power, we had the votes. We actually passed a rent control law by the city council in 2015, and then the apartment association overturned it. The way they did that was they went around gathering signatures, lying to the people of Richmond, saying, if you sign this, and we have testimonies and we have it on video recording and everything, where they said, if you sign this, the signature folks, rent control will be strengthened in Richmond. And so people don't always know whether we have rent control or not. So they said, oh, yeah, well, that sounds like a good thing. So they got enough signatures, which meant that either we would have to put it on the ballot or we'd have to repeal it altogether. So what we did was repeal it and put it on the ballot, because we made it even stronger. And the way we got the word out, because they were spending lots of money to try and defeat this in the election, was by forming a coalition. So the RPA initiated it, but we worked very closely with ACE, the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, who were really door knocking on a lot of houses that were expressing who were seeing the need by low-income families who were getting evicted. So we formed a coalition of 20 organizations. So not only do you have to form an alliance, like a year-in and year-out group that runs local corporate-free candidates, but you also have to form broader groups, coalitions. So we had the SEIU 1021, the City Employees Union, because they were getting priced out of their apartments as well. And we had Tenants Together, which is really a statewide group of statewide organizations supporting tenants. So what you have to do, but it didn't have to be a tenants' rights organization only. I mean, we had our urban garden group join us. We had our disability rights folks join us. We had we had APEN, the Asian Pacific Environmental Network. We had CBE, the Communities for Better Environment. All the organizations that we knew had a progressive vision, came together, and we just door knocked. We rewrote the ordinance so it was stronger. We did videos. We put out some mailers. We raised money, and we got it on the ballot, and it passed by 2/3. Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about your background, because people have asked, where you came from. I know your political background, but a little bit more just about your biography, and also to address your personal style in working with organizations in coalition. I have found it is very difficult because you have a lot of chiefs and everybody has ideas, and it's very difficult to get people to subsume their own ideas. I think it should happen here in Los Angeles, but I think it takes certain personal qualities. So I'm wondering if in the question talking about your background, your childhood growing up, your biography, you could talk about maybe what personal qualities you feel you employ to be effective in coalition building.
I have 4 sisters, and my father was a union carpenter, and my mother a factory worker and housewife. We grew up outside of, I was born in Chicago, and we moved to the northwest side where I grew up. And I lived most of my life in Chicago, working at various things. I taught school for a while. I worked for the American Library Association, working for a researcher as an admin assistant. I worked for a family resource coalition doing data entry. I worked for grocery stores as a cashier. I worked in the post office for a while. I worked in a factory for a while. I had that. My politics kind of led me into certain types of jobs so I could unite, I think, with people that I felt, needed to be supported and, unionized and such. So I had some of my efforts were definitely politically motivated. Other times it was just to, get the paycheck that was needed. And I would say in terms of how did I get my style for coalition building? I would say, a passion for changing things and making a difference is what really leads me. And, I believe in humanity. I believe in most people's goodwill. I know there's those at the top that I don't trust, and I don't try to build a coalition with them. But I think, there's conflicts among, when you have this coalition building, and I think out of conflict often comes better solutions, and we shouldn't be afraid of conflict. So I think that's what leads me. I just go in knowing and thinking the best about people, and if there's conflict, I fight for what I believe in, hear what other people believe in. Hearing other people's perspective, I think, is something that is important and that I work at, and I think it helps to build coalitions. So, I know we're all passionate about our views, and, that's part of what leads us, but also listening and learning from others is something that I picked it up along the way. So
we also have a refinery in our area, and so I understand some of the struggles that you had with that. I also ran for city council in the election back in March in another area that had a number of refineries. So I understand some of that struggle, but I wanted to go along the lines of what Lauren was talking about as far as working with some of the community groups. One of the things I found out is, and if you could tell us more about your experience the first time you ran against all the incumbents. Because the thing I noticed is the incumbents are very good at co-opting some of the local community groups. And I wanted to see how you got past that struggle, because that was a very uphill battle, I'm sure.
It's important when you build an alliance or you build a coalition to be independent, irregardless of if you believe in changing things through the Democratic Party or independently through a party or building a movement statewide or nationwide. When you're working to build a local coalition like we did in Richmond, we were very clear that we had to remain independent because other groups were trying to, some of them just left us alone because they knew that we were so independent. But I think, they were trying to cozy up to us and, hey, why are you trying to push so hard? We're a good organization and we stand for the same things you do, even though they were being so ineffective for so many years. So our independence and putting ourselves out there as an independent progressive alliance was important, and we just had to keep it going year in and year out, and today it still is that way. And I think a lot of the groups that were more likely to co-opt just kind of eventually gave up, and now they know that, hey, the RPA is the RPA, and they're all welcome. We're inclusive. Anybody can join us. But we're not going to give up our independent point of view on the issues and our separate people-first vision for some group that's been ineffective for decades.
Who is running against you, and what kind of campaign do you expect, and that?
So there's a host of candidates running. If you look up candidates for lieutenant governor, Wikipedia has a list of them at the bottom. I think that's the name of the Wikipedia entry, and they're all corporate candidates. I'm distinct in being a corporate-free candidate for lieutenant governor. I don't believe anybody else has put that out there. There's several Democrats. I think there's one Republican. I believe there's actually one more person running NPP. Most of them, some of them don't have any name recognition. I have I have a lot of name recognition in Northern California, and that's why being out here is so exciting, to get to know all of you and have you get to know me. But I do have 12 and a half years of elected office work, and so I think some of there's a couple unknowns that I don't think have any background or record to speak of. And the ones that are, like Ed Hernandez is one of the candidates for lieutenant governor, and he's got a lot of funding from corporations, and so does Alani, whose last name I can't remember. She's a very wealthy former ambassador to Hungary, I guess it is. And so she's a very establishment-oriented, very corporate funded. I believe that my candidacy is unique among all of them. So, yeah, and maybe all these corporate candidates will split the vote, and, they won't be able to galvanize the people that I'm hoping to galvanize, and I think I have a good chance of winning because there are a lot of people ready for some new politics, and I'm reaching out to as many as I can. Our revolution groups, all the people who found Bernie Sanders so inspiring. They called me in the East Bay the Bernie Sanders of the East Bay, and I, of course, am overwhelmed by such a wonderful thing to have said, but I certainly would love to galvanize the support in one state like he did for the entire country. So, yeah.
How many people in this room wish she were running for governor instead of lieutenant governor? Thank you very much. That was Gayle McLaughlin, people, corporate-free candidate for lieutenant governor here in California. So thank you for watching, and contribute to Gayle.